This is Sawyer Robertson, and you're listening to the Bearcast on SicEm365.com.
Welcome into the Bearcast on SicEm365.com, presented by WellMed Medical Management and Barefoot Campus Outfitter. Head over to Barefoot Campus Outfitter in Waco or go to the website, use SicEm365 as your code to save 20% off your purchase. Colt, today I thought we were only going to talk about Baylor's matchup against Utah, but instead the news dropped that Mack Rhoades, Baylor Athletic Director, is taking a leave of absence for personal reasons. You and I spent about 30 minutes earlier today doing a podcast for the premium side about this, kind of our latest intel, what we've heard, what's next for Baylor, where they're going to. I think just right now, maybe we can just spend a couple minutes just kind of reacting to this, just the simple fact that, man, how crazy is this day? A really kind of embarrassing moment, I would say, for Baylor Athletics. It's just hard to not say that. I mean, with all the news that has come out, it's just been consistently negative, which is really unfortunate. He ends up taking a leave, obviously battling personal issues, lots of personal issues that seem to be adding up and turning into different events, like we saw with the Trig event, and anything else that may have occurred during this time period as well. But what were your initial reactions and thoughts when you first saw this news?
Yeah, I mean, go listen to the premium podcast if you're interested in our discussion on that. I mean, I think I was more passionate there than I would be here, just from the standpoint we just discussed it for 30 minutes, so I'm a little burnt out on it. But it's a tough day, and I think it's laced with the thought that you have 3 weeks if something else is going to change within the athletic department before the end of the football season. And all the speculation's been on Dave Aranda and if he can get through another season. And now this throws a major kink into all of that. So I'm disappointed. To say I'm surprised, like I'm not sure if I'm surprised or not. It's way too soon for me to react to, oh yeah, I'm surprised that this happened, because I think looking back, there's so many indicators like something's going on. Like, why is Mac not speaking to the media? Like, why are we not hearing from him? What's going on? Like, why are there the thing with the ASU game? Like, there's a lot of those things that we've been discussing independently, and now it's kind of evident why. And here we are. And so, really good discussion though. Make sure you go and listen to it. But yeah, Baylor's just in a really tough spot, and another distraction, another hurdle in Dave Aranda's career. We could discuss it the opposite way, but like he's dealt with so much in terms of the NIL, the transfer portal, his own blunders, and now something else within his athletic department that's a distraction to his team, because the team's paying attention to it as well before a big game against Utah. So it's just a conundrum right now, and it's really unfortunate because we've been saying that there's not really a face of the athletic program or the football program as of late. And now we're just kind of like twisting in the wind of who's going to tell us anything? Are we going to have any more information come out? Because right now, Javon Overshone and Cody Hall are your interim ADs, and President Livingstone's obviously going to have a hand in everything else that happens. But we're just kind of twisting in the wind, and not that we haven't already been doing that a little bit. But I'm a little concerned about what's going to happen over the next 3 weeks.
Yeah, I think the timing is the most surprising part in all of this. Just the fact that Baylor doesn't have a lot of time to figure all of this out and make a decision on what's going to happen with the AD position. But again, I think based on what we've talked about, we're 3 weeks out. It's very hard to see a path towards them not deciding to move on, at least at the AD position. But we'll see on that. That's just speculation, but we'll see kind of how these things progress and where they go from here. But he is no longer at Baylor, just taking personal leave. He said he initiated it. So it's very clear that those personal things really added up to this moment for this Baylor football program and for Baylor athletics in general. So Colt, let's move on to the game. Baylor's got a big matchup coming up this weekend against Utah, a ranked matchup, a matchup that had a lot of anticipation at the beginning of the year. This was kind of one that we all circled and said, oh yeah, this is going to be the biggest game in November. Baylor's going to have this opportunity to be competing for the Big 12 championship. Utah should be up there in the standings as well. Only one side of the coin here held up to their end of the bargain, as Utah is still in it right now. They are on the outside looking in as far as making the Big 12 championship, but they do have a path to the college football playoff if they win out and have a 10-2 record. So they have a lot to play for here. Baylor, on the other hand, just trying to salvage what has been kind of a tough season, pretty much no path to a Big 12 championship berth now. So really, you're just fighting for a better bowl game at the moment. Should be a good one. Again, Utah's ranked number 13 in the country. So a really, really good football team that Baylor is about to play this weekend. In one of the last opportunities at home in front of a big crowd. I think this will probably be the last big crowd of the year, because usually that game at the end of the season is a little less attended, being that Thanksgiving is kind of right there. Real quick, Sawyer Robertson has something to remind you about.
Want the latest information about your favorite team? Try out SIGM 365 premium content the next 3 months for just $5 by clicking the link below.
And now, back to the Bearcast.
Yeah, maybe a big crowd. We'll see. I'm anxious to see Baylor fans react to this news this week and with Mac Rhodes and stuff. But yeah, it is, and it's really unfortunate because this has kind of been I mentioned this feeling to someone earlier this week or maybe the end of last week. But for the last 4 years, by this time of the year, last year was fun. Like the run to close the season, the 6 wins was cool, but you weren't playing for anything of significance. And so another year, late in, middle of November, nothing to play for other than you're playing a ranked team at home. Again, what's your favorite? I think the line is now 7.5, which is dropped even more. So that's pretty interesting, but it's still 7.5. Like your favored, your dogs by more than a touchdown at home, and that's not great in a league that is full of close lines for the most part, all the time. A lot of close games. To be home dogs by that margin is kind of discouraging. But I will say, like, this just feels like a spot, like a random upset win in the Big 12. Utah, doesn't play too well, not overlooks Baylor because they still have a lot to play for, but it wouldn't surprise me at all. Do I have the confidence in that? No. But it's off of a bye week. You just beat up on UCF. Maybe there's some, rally mentality with this team. They come out and play really well. Utah's defense is really good. They run the football really well. It just doesn't seem like a good matchup for Baylor in general. And maybe they surprise me and maybe they come out, but I don't think you're going to win this in a traditional sense of just lining up and playing football and winning the game. I think they're going to have to catch some major breaks in this game to win it.
So going through the numbers, like I like to do, just to look at the trends. Baylor's now 6-12 against Power 4 schools in McLean Stadium since 2022, with a 1-9 record in games I'd classify as big games. Baylor's last win over a ranked team at home was November 13th, 2021, in a 27-14 win over number 4 Oklahoma. That was a big win, obviously, but it's been a long time since that win occurred. And so now Baylor gets an opportunity here to try to get a ranked win for the first time since then. It hasn't really been great in these big games. They're losing by an average of right around 2 touchdowns. I think it's right at 13 points per game is their margin of defeat in those 10 big games that I mentioned. So I think the trend would be Utah to win by 2 scores feels pretty trendy and feels fairly likely based on the trends. But yeah, I do agree with you in some ways. I think we're going to dive into this as we get a little further. I think starting on the offensive side, there are reasons to be optimistic that Baylor can score some points here. And I think the over-under being 60.5 points speaks to that a little bit.
Yeah.
It's a big number. Now, I will say this. Utah has had multiple games this year where they've held up their end of massive point spreads, where they're scoring, 45, 48 points, and the other team's only scoring, 14 points. So that does have something to do with this, I think. But in general, that big point spread in this game with the margin only being a touchdown does speak to Vegas kind of saying, we think Baylor can score some points here. And I believe Baylor can as well. But it is going to take some doing. It's going to take a very complete performance because Utah is good in specific areas on defense that could give Baylor some problems.
Yeah, that's the spread when I was looking at that, because we're going to do our best bets as well. But 60.5 is a really big number. And this isn't Utah favored by 17 points with a 60-point over and under. That's a really kind of caught me by surprise. And I think you could say, yeah, I mean, if Utah scores 38 points, well, then you're pretty close. You feel comfortable with Baylor scored 22 points, but that's not what they're expecting to happen here. And so Utah can run the football so well with their big offensive line that I worry about this game slowing down a little bit, which would hurt Baylor's offense. But then again, it's kind of like, does Dave Aranda just kind of throw caution to the wind? And maybe I keep saying this and he never does it, but can they just go out and just say, hey, we're just going to smother the run? They kind of did it against UCF, but a massively different challenge. I don't know. Maybe they figure out how to stop the run and then also score enough points and possess the ball enough against Utah. For whatever reason, I just feel like it's a bad matchup. If Utah's going to be on the field a lot running the football, I think you're going to press on offense. And if you can't run the ball on offense, it could just kind of snowball on you. But it could be good and bad. I mean, Baylor's shown the ability to throw the football with Sawyer Robertson and the receivers enough. And I don't know, and you can answer this for me, I don't know if Utah has faced the passing offense that's just, I mean, Tech, I guess, would be the one. And they held up pretty well there. Outside of Tech, I don't know who else. But, it's maybe Baylor's able to get them and score some points on them.
So I think the big thing that I'll get to with that, because I did do a little bit of research on, who they've played, what quarterbacks they've played. So I'll run through this really quick. Tech is the one that is the most comparable, and Tech had to play both quarterbacks because Baron Morton got hurt in that game. They threw for 311 yards and completed 71.5% of their passes.
Yeah,
that feels like a recipe for success for Baylor if that's kind of what you get. Now, who else has Utah played this year in the Big 12? So Texas Tech, I mentioned the two quarterbacks split time. Against West Virginia, they played the third string and fourth string quarterbacks for West Virginia. Against Arizona State, they played Jeff Sims, not Sam Levitt. Against Colorado, they faced Caden Salter and Ryan Staub, which neither of them have been very good this year. And then against Cincinnati, Brendan Sorsby is a good quarterback. Like, he's a very good quarterback. So it's comparable, but I don't think their receivers are as comparable. And I think that led to problems for Cincinnati when they got down and had to throw the football. I mean, Sorsby completed, I think, 33% of his passes. So it was a dreadful day for him in the Cincinnati offense. So when you look at that, it's pretty easy to say they haven't faced a passing attack like this, because they haven't. I mean, this team can really throw the football with Sawyer Robertson and with these receivers. There's a lot of dynamic weapons for Baylor. And I think the other part of that is when you run as much man as Utah does, they run a ton of cover one. They're going to put guys on islands and run a lot of man defense. If you have receivers that can win in one-on-one situations and a quarterback that can make those throws, you can give them issues. And frankly, Baylor has that. And I think that's a reason to be optimistic. That's Baylor's path, is if Sawyer Robertson and these receivers play really well and win those one-on-one battles, because in my eyes, I view Baylor's passing attack as being significantly better against man than they are against zone, which is what we saw against Cincinnati and TCU, where they really, really struggled to find consistency and rhythm.
Yeah, I mean, you go back to the Auburn game, I guess would probably be the most comparable to this defensively, and Baylor had very, very much, I don't say their way. Sawyer had a lower completion percentage, but they had a lot of big explosive plays in the passing game. They made a lot of missed tackles by their receivers on yards after catch. So maybe that lines up in this way. And my biggest concern would be Utah's pass rush in those situations. If you can't run the football, Utah can really rush the passer. But it's not unlike Auburn. But we just saw Auburn kind of had their way in pass rush too, not had their way. Sawyer had a really good day, but they still had four. He was always kind of being manipulated in the pocket. So if Baylor can get, let's say, Bryson Washington going a little bit and run the football between the tackles, that could help. And I think that Baylor, too, will, against UCF, we saw this, a really quick passing game to the perimeter because UCF has decent pass rushers. Just getting the ball out of the hands of Sawyer, and that slows down the pass rush too. So I think there's going to be some things schematically. But yeah, I really like Baylor's ability, and that's been the case all season. If you're going to play man against these receivers, someone's going to be in a really bad situation in coverage. And that starts on the outside with Josh Cameron all the way into Michael Trigg and the slot receivers. Like someone's going to be open if Sawyer has time and can find them.
And I agree with the screens and the swing passes to running backs, which Baylor likes to run. If Baylor's receivers can block out there and make life hard for Utah's secondary, you could have an opportunity there. UCF ran a ton of man as well. And so I think that was a nice preparation kind of for this matchup. UCF's been pretty good against the pass, against everyone, aside from Baylor. They struggled against the Bears last 2 weeks ago. But I did want to point out, you mentioned the running game. So there are reasons to be optimistic about Baylor running the football. Obviously, the reasons to not be optimistic are the fact that Baylor hasn't ran the football well really all year. It's been very inconsistent, but Utah's played 6 Big 12 games. Colorado is the only team to fail to reach 149 rushing yards. Utah has allowed over 200 rushing yards in 3 of those 6 games. So they have gotten ran on, and also important to keep in mind here, Baylor's 11-1 when they run for over 150 yards in the last 2 seasons. So that is a target number for this Baylor offense, and Utah's been willing to give that up. Now, the other area, the opposite area of that, and why I think it's important Baylor runs football, is Utah is second in the Big 12 in sacks, only behind Texas Tech. They get after the quarterback. They got some really, really good pass rushers that could cause problems for Baylor, especially when you look at their tackle position that's kind of been in flux so far this year. Baylor needs to be able to run it some, because you got to be able to make those defensive ends respect it and not pin their ears back and get after Sawyer Robertson on a bunch of 3rd and 8s or 2nd and 10s. Like you just can't have a lot of those in this game. And again, Utah has been willing to give that up. It's just, how consistently can you do it? Can you do it in consistent ways instead of just a few chunk plays here and there?
Yeah. And, with Bryson's situation and him wearing that helmet, like, do I have this wrong? Did I hear Dave Aranda say that he was healthier than he has been? Was that from
Healthiest
this
he's
week?
been since, I guess, the beginning of the year, probably.
Yeah, and I know he's been limited. It's like he starts every game and has, 3 or 4 carries, and then he's on the sideline for the majority of the game. Caden Knighton had the really good game against UCF. We see Michael Turner do some stuff. But Bryson's just different. And if he can be effective in this game and play start to finish, even if he's limited, really just play start to finish, that's massive. And that was what we were hoping from him after the first bye week, right? Like, we were thinking, oh, he's going to come back, he's going to be healthy. And then they got punched in the face, and it didn't happen. In the TCU game, they couldn't run the football. He just, but maybe one more bye week helps here. But yeah, I'm with you. Like, and I'm not saying it's a time for Sawyer Robertson to go and run a lot, but we saw it more against UCF, where he took off, and that was the one play that he had down the sideline in that game. It was just like, I don't want to say you've been fully capable of doing that all season, but like, that's what he can do. And like, that was one of those times where he can do it. He's not incapable of doing it. So I think the balance of both of them being able to do some on the ground could be of a massive benefit. But I also like the depth too. I mean, Caden Knighton really just staying vertical so much in that game against UCF was very encouraging, because his ability to make guys miss in the second level and set up blocks, it was on full display against UCF. So using a 1-2 combo of Bryson and him, and then even Michael Turner in spots, like, they have that capability. It just hasn't been healthy enough to do it this season, and those freshmen just haven't been ready. So maybe this is a game it just really comes out and surprises, is that they are capable of running the football against a tough rushing defense.
Yeah, it felt very much like in the UCF game, Baylor built a big enough lead so they didn't have to play Bryson Washington much in the second half. That's what it felt like to me late in that game. But it's hard to say that, because the trend has been he plays the first half and then doesn't play the second half. That's been the trend all year. So curious how that plays out. They really need him. I mean, he's just so physical, such just a difference maker. He's what you want Caden Knighton and Michael Turner to be in 2 years. So that's kind of the difference there between those guys. But it is nice to see both Turner and Knighton having splash games here and there, because it does show their potential and what they can be in this game and just in the future for Baylor's rushing attack there. Other things on the offensive side, I think, again, keeping Sawyer clean, guys winning routes at the receiver position, winning consistently for Sawyer Robertson. I think those two areas, along with them being able to run the football, all of those seem to fairly set up well, aside from, again, the pass rush of Utah. That's kind of the one thing where it's like, if they can't hold up in pass protection, then it won't matter if guys are getting open or not. That's the area that they have to figure out. Again, if they can run the football, that'd be great. If guys can get open quickly, that'd be great. If you can run screens, I think that would also help significantly. But ultimately, Baylor spent a lot of money in the transfer portal at their quarterback position and for their pass catchers. And this is a game where that really needs to shine, because if you can win those one-on-ones, you're probably going to be able to score in the high 20s. You might even be able to score in the 30s if it's really hitting. I think that's probably the biggest recipe for success here, is if those guys really win often and Sawyer's able to hit them on, throws that are there, the throws that are available.
Yeah, and that's another thing too to keep in mind is time of possession in this game. And I need to look back to see what they had against UCF. I think that might be one of the only games that Baylor won time of possession this year. And it's because they extended drives. Obviously, they got UCF off the field on fourth downs, and they killed some of UCF's drives early and late in that game, so that helped. Um, but keeping the ball out of Utah's hand, who just wants to control the clock, if Baylor can extend, you want explosive plays, but the quick passing game, winning routes, winning quick slant routes, winning, out routes to the sidelines or back shoulder fades, like those types of deals need to be completed in this game to extend drives and let the clock run for your favor. And I think Baylor truly, they have that ability to do that. We've seen it. Like, I don't want to, there's been a lot that's gone wrong this season, but that's one of the areas that they always exceed in. The only game I guess that they didn't would have been the Cincinnati game, where they just struggled in general. And maybe that pops up again. I just don't. I think that was kind of a one-off. I don't think that's going to necessarily happen in this game. But yeah, I mean, and I do think too, with everything that's been going on within the athletic department, this team has continued to play, and I think this is another opportunity. This team just kind of to tune it all out, go out and play hard, because one thing they continue to do is play hard for Dave Aranda. And I think this is going to be a game where they see an opportunity to go and get a big win, and those receivers might have a little extra juice in this game.
They absolutely might. All right, let's move to the defensive side here, Colt. Baylor had a sneakily amazing performance against UCF. And we've mentioned it, but I don't know that it's been talked about enough. I mean, that was literally one of the best performances defensively in the last 20 years against a Power 5 program. I mean, it was truly an outlier performance this season and in the history of Baylor football. I mean, it was an elite performance statistically. I'm not going to say that UCF is some world beater, but they're not awful. I mean, we just saw Houston lose to West Virginia by 10 points, and UCF beat the brakes off West Virginia. So They're not terrible. Not great, but not terrible. And so now you come into this game, it's like they simplified things. That's what Dave Aranda said. So where do we go from here? Is that going to be built on? Is that going to be something that was just a one-off outlier anomaly? I don't know, but what I do know is they are going to get challenged in a massive way, because Utah can flat out run the football. Yeah. They have an elite offensive line. And I mean, these numbers are staggering. They've played 6 other Power 4 games besides the Tech game. They did not run the ball well against Tech. They only ran for 101 yards. Devin Dampier was injured leading up to that game with his ankle, so it took away some of his mobility. I would also say let's not compare Baylor's defense to Tech's defense either. So very different set of circumstances. So against other programs that are more similar to Baylor, I guess, they're averaging 286.5 rushing yards per game, and they have 19 rushing touchdowns in those 6 games. That is staggering. And the teams that they've played haven't even been that bad against the run. I mean, Arizona State, BYU, West Virginia are all in the top 6 in the Big 12 in run defense. That does not bode well. That is the biggest area of concern. And that is the area of concern where this game could go completely sideways if Baylor's offense doesn't perform at a very high level. Because if they don't perform at a high level, you start turning over the football, you start getting 3 and outs, and you allow Utah's offense to get on the field and run the football effectively like this. I mean, you could find yourself down by 3 or 4 scores pretty quickly.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that they have the ability to do this like they did against UCF. And even going back to the Arizona State game, where I thought Baylor played a decently solid game against Arizona State stopping the run. But this has to be a game where Baylor goes out and just takes away the run, and like you live with what happens in the passing game. Dampier, and I haven't looked at the stats on this. I haven't got them updated before our podcast, but at one point he was the worst passer in the Big 12 throwing the football down the field. Like anything beyond 10 yards, like passer rating was bad, like really bad. That's PFF grades. And I could not live if I'm the head coach in this game, defensive coordinator, head coach Dave Aranda. I could not live with getting beat with the run over and over and over, knowing that they struggle to throw the football downfield. If they hit something over the top because you're being so aggressive against the run, whatever. Like they let them do it. Like I'm not saying completely, abandon and only play a single high the entire game, but like this does not need to be a game where you're just kind of like, oh, let's see if we can get good at this. Like, just go stop the run. Like, make them into a passing team because they're probably still going to run the ball decently well, anyways, if you go in that direction, but at least make it a challenge for them. And if something comes over the top and they score on a long touchdown, then so be it. But I'm not, I feel like I've said this every game this year, maybe save the Cincinnati game and maybe the TCU game, which ironically they get thumped in both of those. But like this is not a game where I'm too concerned about the pass game at all. Like just go and take away the run and see if they beat you at the pass.
I think that's easy to say, harder to do. Because I think a lot of teams have probably taken that approach. And we've also seen Baylor kind of just not really want to do that. And so, I mean, maybe you change your approach in this game, but I mean, this game's not so much different than the Auburn game. This game's not so much different than the Arizona State game. And so,
but they did it more against not Auburn, more against Arizona State and more against UCF, who said we're not as strong of passing teams. And Utah's different because they're decent passing teams, short.
But Cincinnati as well fits in that bill, and they got ran all over.
But you have Sorsby at quarterback throwing the football. I think that's the difference. In TCU is the opposite. And I mentioned TCU again. Like they didn't run the football, and then you just like, hey, we're not going to stop the run, and they ran all over you. I think that you go into this game and you just say, hey, we're at least going to make it challenging for you, because if you just go and let them run the ball up and down the field, you're not going to stop them in the red zone with that approach. Like you're going to have to do this before you get in the red zone. And I don't know. I think that if there is a game that you're going to do this year again, it has to be this game. Just go and say, hey, we're going to play 4 defensive backs, with a star that can play a physical linebacker position, and see if you can, run on us. And if you beat us through the air, then okay. But we're going to trust our corners and our safeties against your okay but not great receivers and tight ends that can test us a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that approach. I just don't even know if that's going to be enough to stop this attack. I just think everyone probably has had that game plan, and then it shifts. And so a big reason for that, per PFF, Utah is number 1 in this category. And the category is 3.4 rushing yards per attempt before contact. That is number 1 in the entire nation. Yeah. Baylor is currently sitting at 84th as far as what they allow. They allow 1.7 yards.
You can't allow that. Like you're already struggling in that area. If you go and let them run for 5 yards before contact, like you have to ugly this game up.
Right. And I mean, that's the goal. So the question is, how do you achieve that goal? I mean, it's going to take more than putting guys in the box, in my eyes. They're going to have to play above themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And I agree that's what they should do. Yeah. I have concerns that they can actually function doing that. And so, yeah, that is an area that I'm definitely looking at. Utah's an elite running football team. Like it is very apparent. Yeah. They got a quarterback that can run, which has also been a problem for Baylor. They do not stop the run well at all. For running quarterbacks, 4 guys have over 60 rushing yards. So you can go ahead and just pencil Devin Dampier in for probably 60 yards on the ground heading into this game. He has a season which was last year at New Mexico, where he had over 1,100 yards and 19 rushing touchdowns. Just a very electric runner when he gets going downhill, but he can also really impact the game with designed runs. It's not just improv. He's physical. He's strong. He pushes the pile. He's been very good. In the last 3 games, he's averaged 87.3 rushing yards against Arizona State, BYU, and Cincinnati. this is going to be an issue. He's going to get his on the ground. I think it's like something drastic would have to change here because Baylor hasn't been able to stop a running quarterback at all. And he's been slowly getting better and better as he's gotten further away from that ankle injury. I don't see that as going very well for Baylor. And that added body, that added wrinkle makes it even harder, even if you are going to load the box. It just gives them another guy to block. It gives them another option, makes things more confusing for a defense when you're having to identify a quarterback that can run like this.
I don't necessarily, it does come down to having numbers and making it more favorable for the defense. But I also think it's just about being aggressive. So it's either going to be death by 1,000 paper cuts or death by, hey, we are
Right.
really, really aggressive and we're getting a couple of stops and disruptive plays that they haven't gotten all season. And then letting them get the big play in return. Like, you just can't let Utah, and if you're trying to truly win this game, you can't just let Utah just eat up and have 40 minutes of time in possession because they will absolutely do that. And if you are not being aggressive in your defensive front, slanting, whatever you're trying to do, run blitzing to be aggressive with Keaton Thomas and your linebackers and your edges, I just think you might sacrifice some, and it goes back to the, in the secondary. Well, yeah, they might drive the field on us, but if we're really aggressive in coverage and they throw it over the top, it's the same end result. We just get the ball back to our offense. And I just think that if Dave Aranda, I mean, he might feel confident coming out in this game, like we can at least play moderately well in our base defense, but we just haven't seen that all season. If he goes that route, I will be disappointed.
I would be too, especially with the bye week. Hopefully he can concoct something that will, cause Utah to struggle a little bit, or at least, make them think about needing to throw the football. That has been a huge key to beating Utah this year. In the two games they lost against BYU and Texas Tech, Devin Dampier threw on average 10 more times in that game. Obviously, you're trailing in some regards in those games, but they also haven't played in very many competitive games. And so if you force them to play a competitive game, maybe you force Dampier to have to throw the ball a lot, which is exactly what Baylor should want in this game, because I do think some of their biggest weaknesses for Utah that I think keeps them from being as great as some of the metrics say, which the metrics here, let's just break those down really quick. This is the first team Baylor's playing all year that has a top 10 offense and a top 15 defense, basically according to every single metric. Most metrics have Utah as a top 6 team right now, with as high as number 5 in the entire country, just based on the metrics. I don't view them as a top 5 team. I think they're more like a top 15, top 12 type team. And the reason for that is their pass game. I do think that Dampier is a really good runner. I think there is something lacking with him as a thrower. I don't think he's an elite passer of the football. I also don't think his pass catching weapons are that great. I really don't. Like Ryan Davis, quality receiver, I think on a great team is probably your number 2 or 3 receiver. And then Dallin Bentley is obviously their dude at tight end. He's a very good player, a very reliable tight end, which they always have. But outside of that, they don't have a single guy that has over 170 receiving yards. So they're really not very explosive outside of those 2 guys. I think that speaks to, can you do everything to sell out to stop the run, force guys to win these one-on-one matchups against Baylor's pretty good cornerbacks. I mean, LeVar Thornton's getting better every single week. Tevin Williams should be getting closer to 100% heading into this game. Caldra Wilford's played a lot better since his tough performance against TCU. I think the safeties have had moments here and there. DJ Coleman an interception against UCF, Jacob Redding an interception. Like, there are some reasons to be maybe optimistic that they can hold up even in single coverage or single high safety looks. We'll see if they can do that. But I will say, I think that's the weakness of Utah on the offensive side.
Yeah, Dampier just throw the ball downfield. I mean, he's going to complete a lot of stuff underneath and completion percentage wise down the field. If you're even, in my mind, if you're even relatively close to your receiver, you have a pretty good chance of making a play of the ball or it being incomplete. Like, I think at one point I saw his completion percentage for downfield. I'm going to pull this up while we're talking, but I think it was like 12% or something, anything beyond 20 yards. And it might have even been beyond 10 yards. That doesn't seem right. And I haven't looked at it, but like, they just don't complete the ball downfield a lot. So like, if you're just playing a tight coverage and seeing if their receiver is going to beat you deep, I think that's the best game plan. And I'm going to pull this up. I'm going to pass it off to you real quick, but I'm going to look that up. I don't know. Like you just can't let them come out and just run the ball all over your defense that's already shown that it's going to struggle against the run.
Yeah, and I think that for Utah, I just want to reiterate here, they're a very good team. I also think they've gotten pretty lucky, like we talked about with, who they've played against and when they've played against them, and they've blown out a lot of teams. And so I do think that if you can put them in an uncomfortable situation where the game is close, you might have some success. Again, I think the key here, can you force Dampier to win this game, not allow him to just hand the ball off or not allow him to just tuck it and run? And can you force these receivers to consistently win battles against your secondary? I think that's where you can really win this football game and really find a way to gain some momentum. Obviously, that's going to require some complementary football, because if the defense does make a player get a stop, the offense really needs to score off of those and put pressure on Utah in this game if you want to have success and actually force Dampier to get out of a rhythm, because when they're in a rhythm, that's where they're the most dangerous.
Yeah. So deep shots this season, 20 plus yards. He has 6 of 35, which is 17.1% completions, 1 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, which is for PFF is a 29.7 passer grade, which is abysmally bad. And then his medium is actually his best area. So 10 to 19 yards is 92.4, 9 touchdowns, 1 interception. But he's completing anything short, 0 to 9 yards behind line of scrimmage, like, I don't know, 88 and 100% of his passes. So it's whatever that comes out to, really high, like 95% of his passes, anything 9 yards or less. Then the further, obviously, he gets down. And that's not atypical from quarterbacks in college, but it's that deep range that he really struggles. 7 turnover-worthy plays throwing the ball deep. So, like, if you're lining up and giving him cushion to throw the ball, that's the worst possible out. Like, that's the worst possible thing that you can do. Line up, press their receivers, press their tight ends, be physical with them if they're trying to get deep. They're not going to take a ton of shots, but if you're giving up underneath stuff, you're just asking for it to be a long day. Like, take those if they're already going to run it against you in those areas, you got to take the pass away. Don't give them those options just to throw it, 5 yards or behind the line of scrimmage all day long. There is a game plan, as if Baylor can execute that game plan. And that's what you said. Everyone's kind of known this information and who's been able to do it. BYU did it a little bit. Tech did it, but outside of that, no one else really has. And so will Baylor be able to? It'll take their best effort by far.
And the problem is those two teams you just named are probably the 2 best defenses in the Big 12. I think that's pretty fair to say. So you are talking about a completely different type of defense than we've seen over the past, 9 games, which is a rather large sample size. Doesn't give me a lot of optimism because Baylor doesn't get after the quarterback well either. So Utah's not really going to have to worry much about that. That's been an issue for Baylor all season long. There's really not a lot of reasons to be optimistic about what Baylor can do defensively. I think the key things here are if Baylor can win on key downs, key possessions like they did against UCF. In the games that Utah lost this year, they're 1 for 7 on 4th down. So that's a key. You got to be able to get off the field on 4th down. Again, that's putting your offense in a good position, most likely to go score as well. And then the other area, obviously, is the turnover margin, which, frankly, Baylor's going to have to win the turnover margin to win this game. They were a -4 in their losses to Texas Tech and BYU. Again, that just speaks to kind of the recipe you have to come in with. You're not going to get many stops in the red zone against Utah. It's just very hard to stop them once they get there from scoring touchdowns. But I do think those other 2 areas, 4th down and turnover margin, crucially important. Baylor can't allow Utah to be efficient in those 2 areas.
Yeah, and the good news is that Utah's not a great turnover margin team either this year. So that's an area Baylor has struggled, obviously, but Utah's still number 12 in the Big 12 in turnover margin per game. They're -3 versus Baylor, who's -9 in turnover and is number 16. So, yeah, if that can flip for Baylor's sake and they can force Utah into some turnovers, that's huge. But it also just comes down to protecting the ball offensively and winning that. Because, I mean, even at 7.5 points, it's more than a touchdown favorite by Utah. A couple of turnovers positive, and you're can completely change the game. Baylor has to figure out how to be really efficient on offense, not turn it over. And Utah's not they don't force a ton of turnovers, which is interesting. They're number 12 in the Big 12 in conference play only with 6 gained turnovers on the season. So in 6 games, they forced 6 turnovers, 2 fumbles gained, 4 interceptions gained versus Baylor on offense. And you look at total loss, they're number 15 in the Big 12 in total loss turnovers with 13 of those. And there's 8 fumbles lost, 5 interceptions lost. So it's kind of a weakness versus a weakness here. And if Baylor can figure out how to come out atop on that battle, maybe they're right in this game at the end of it.
I think it's also important to mention, and I know, Travis Roeder posted this on our website, but it was pretty interesting kind of how Utah's played defense this year. They don't really give up a bunch of yards. This isn't a Cincinnati where they give up a bunch of yards in the 20s and then they tighten up in the red zone. Utah more so gives up big plays, and that's kind of it. You're just giving up some explosive plays, but it's not consistency from offenses. And so that will be interesting. That means Baylor's opportunities in the red zone may be kind of limited. They may score from further out a couple times, but in the red zone, if they do get down there, Baylor's going to have to find a way to score touchdowns in this game. And I do think that Spavital and company will be pretty aggressive on 4th down in the red zone as well. Just kind of knowing the game situation and kind of what you're thinking Utah might do on the offensive side. That's going to be an interesting facet as well, as Baylor's kind of been okay in that area, but not as good as they were a year ago.
Yep. Yeah, it's Utah. They're going to want to possess the ball, keep it out of your offense's hands. I mean, they're number 4 in the Big 12 in time of possession and conference play only, but for all games, they're number 2. Baylor's, lower 3rd in that category, and not the style that they want to play unless they have a lead. And if they have a lead, they obviously want to just hold the ball and possess the ball and keep you from scoring. But yeah, it's a tough matchup, and I think it's one of those games. Like, would I be surprised if Baylor won? Yeah, I would be surprised, but not like this earth-shattering surprise. Like, Utah's not. I wouldn't call them, invincible. Obviously, they're not, but they're a very good team who's only lost to very good teams in BYU and Texas Tech. So I'm really anxious to see how this game plays out, and it will just also be another, in determining what's going to happen with Dave Aranda ultimately. If he can win this game and it sets up for the last 2 games of the season in very winnable games against Arizona and Houston, more so if you beat Utah, would just create a whole new layer to this entire saga that's been going on this season.
Incredible drama. Just incredible drama if they're able to win this game, because it certainly feels like one, if you play like you have all year, there's no chance you're winning this game. And if you play like you have been all year, there's no chance this game is really within like 17 points. So we'll see. It'd have to be another complete flip, but we did see that against UCF, and we've seen them compete against pretty good teams, whether it's Arizona State or Auburn as well. All right, Colt. So what's your prediction for this game? Baylor taking on Utah, 6 p.m. on ESPN2 in McLean Stadium.
Yeah, I can't pick Baylor to win this one. I mean, you're looking at a 7-8 point line at home. I don't like the matchups in it in general. Like I said, I wouldn't be shocked if Baylor figured out how to pull an upset. It's not like this abnormal, it's not like a 14-point line or something. It's still relatively close, but I think Utah's offense has the ability to just kind of possess the ball, especially if Baylor's not willing to just force their hand to throw the football. And I don't see Dave Aranda doing that because he hasn't done it all season outside of maybe the UCF game. So over and under 60.5. I do think Baylor will score some points. I think they'll get some explosive play scores if they can protect Sawyer. But I think it's going to end up being like a 35-27 type game right around that line. And if you flip the turnovers, maybe they pull it out. But, I mean, I'm thinking an 8-point, 9-point, 10-point loss is probably the most realistic.
And I know there's been a lot of conversation about Utah's offense this year, but most of their games where they've blown someone out, they've scored a high point total. In the games that they lost, they really didn't score at that high of a level. And so really, if you're anticipating that Utah's going to score like 45 points in this game, then really what you're calling is for a complete blowout. Like, I don't see this being a 45-42 type game. I'd be very surprised if we saw something like that. Yeah, exactly. So I kind of think, again, in a more competitive atmosphere, which I anticipate this game being, I do think it will drag the score down a little bit. I still think it's going to hit the over because these two teams, I just feel like it's going to go in that direction. But I think it'll be something more so like 37-28, 35-27, kind of like you said. Somewhere in that range is kind of my expectation. But I do think Utah's going to win this game. I just think the best thing they do is the worst thing Baylor does. And I know we said that about UCF as well, but UCF was very much a home run hitting offense only. And if you could keep them from hitting home runs running the football, you're going to be fine. They also didn't have a mobile quarterback. Taven Jackson is okay, but he's not a runner. Dampier is a flat out runner. I think that ultimately those two factors are going to be a difference. I think Utah's going to pile up at least over 200 yards rushing, probably closer to like 250 in this game. And Baylor's just going to have to match them with points. But yeah, I'm going to take Utah. It's just hard to pick Baylor in a game like this against a Utah team that is really, really good, and a Utah team coming off a bye, and a Utah team with a ton to still play for.
Yeah. Baylor winning this game changes the outlook for the rest of the season so much. And that's on top of the UCF win back to back. You played well against UCF, beat a top 15-ish type team in Utah. And then if you win out, like all these discussions that we've had about Dave Aranda, well, he's completely safe if that happens. I don't see it happening. I think that it kind of sets the precedent for the rest of the season this weekend, and Baylor loses at home.
Absolutely. So Colt and I will be back with our Big 12 picks of the week, and then we'll be back to recap the Utah game on Monday. But thanks everybody for listening. This has been the Bearcast on Sikkim365.com.
Join Sikkim 365 Premium on a $1 for 1 month trial to read our experts' notes and insights. Know about high school commits, off-season transfers, coaching staff changes, and so much more before the rest. Also, download the Sikkim 365 app on your iPhone today to get instant notifications of breaking news, read up on the latest inside info, easily interact with other Baylor fans on our forums, and get alerts for anything published by your favorite staff members.